Hi, welcome to Hollywood Crime Scene. This is Rachel Fisher.
Hi, this is Desi Jedeikin.
How's it going, Des?
Pretty good. I got sick again. Like I'm re-sick. It's a new sickness. My life is misery, but you guys can complain about all my flaws. My vocal whatevers and
Well, I'm taking over the show today.
Good.
It's my week to do the story, so Desi can sit back and
just interject
with her sassy comments. First thing we're gonna do is thank our latest Patreon contributors. This week we had Marlene, Allison, Nicole, Laura, Monique, Kirsten, Judy, and Amy. Thank you guys so much. That's so cool.
Also, if you don't have money to donate, which is totally fine and cool, we love you anyway, you can help the show out by going to iTunes and giving us a 5-star review or write a review if you have extra time. That's also very helpful to
it does
the show.
help the show. Helps us get seen.
Yeah, you can help in many ways.
Yes. Yes, you can. So Desi and I watched the American Crime Story.
The assassination of Gianni Versace.
Now, I read that it was deliberate that Ryan Murphy, who's the showrunner,
right. I reported that
the
last
assassination.
week, that it was a deliberate thing because they think it's like a sort of government conspiracy, homophobic thing. Like the fact that they didn't catch Cunanan before he got to Versace was because it was gay men
homophobia
being killed initially, or at least the first two slayings by Cunanan were gay men.
Right.
So they think that's why he wasn't captured. Maybe like he should have maybe been captured before he got to Versace.
Right.
Which may be true. I mean, it's hard to say why people do what they do.
It's an interesting thing to debate on, but I think there's no question that Andrew Cunanan himself was just a narcissistic sociopath who had no empathy for other people, who was a murderer.
Right. And I don't know. I guess we'll get into it. So should we recap?
Let's recap briefly the show. Yeah. So I was surprised personally that in the first episode, they just get right into the murder.
Right. And we talked about this a bit before we started. It's pretty, and this is something I did hear was a complaint of the family, Versace's family, that they really focused on his injuries. Like the shots were pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
They focused. And there were a lot of them. This was not just like a
flash of
his head on the stairs or whatever. There's like a huge scene in the hospital where he's literally lying there after dying and they're cleaning him up or something, right? And it's just like you're seeing his head wound.
I was surprised that we saw the wounds as well.
Also, we got to see the bird get killed.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which I don't even remember. But then when I did my research last week, that's when I heard about the bird thing, and to see it was like a very, very big dramatic moment with the bird.
They made that a point in the episode to show that he had also killed a bird in the process, not on purpose.
There was some funny things in the opening that stood out to me in weird kind of ways, and these are the kind of things I do love focusing on in these kind of. I don't know what the right word is. I mean, they're borderline campy, these kind of shows.
Well, Ryan Murphy is like...
Yeah, which is fine. I love that. But there is something a little extra. These aren't straight up, true crime. They're kind of... They have all these extra things that just make me laugh. One of them, and I mentioned this to Rachel, was when he went to the magazine, the kiosk or whatever. He's like, I'll take the one with Christy and the one with Diana. And I just laugh because it's like the kiosk owner is probably some like old dude. It's like as if he knows who Christy Turlington is. But it's like these little insider like fashion, like, ooh, like we're fashionistas. We know who Christy is.
Right.
And like Diana. The other thing was when Cunanan was like walking around Miami. First of all, it's like there's like a very cheesy opening where he's in the ocean screaming.
Yeah.
And I do think what's his name? Darren Criss is very good.
He was very good.
The other thing I liked was he was walking around Miami Beach, and there was like a guy who looked like Santa Claus in a Speedo skating. Do you remember that?
That was so Miami. I liked that touch.
it just stood out to me because I was like, hey, like we're not gonna. I want to hear about that guy.
I wanted to know where he was going. I wanted to know his story.
I'm just like not a Miami girl, so I don't really know a ton about that type of town. It's probably like the last place I would ever live. Like,
right.
I'm just not a beach girl. I don't know if most of you have seen me, but couldn't be paler and whiter. Like I'm like a Misty Moore's like English Irish type girl. So for me, Miami would be like hell. Like I'd have to walk around with like 100 SPF sunscreen on and huge hats. Like I just would not enjoy it. I don't rollerblade. Like I just can't. I don't even go to the beach. Like,
look, if they had a casino in Miami, I'd probably live there, and that's that on that.
So you're into it.
I'm so into it.
Right.
I mean, I've never been to Florida.
I like the idea of it, but I just know I would be in misery.
But you've lived in Florida.
Oh my God, I was
before.
born there.
So.
And I've been to Miami, but I don't think as a kid, I wasn't there since it became cool. Like,
right.
But yeah. So the other thing I thought was interesting is that they seem like they're really going into this fantasy aspect of it with him.
That I want to talk about. I want to address that because if you listened to our show last week, we talked about whether or not Andrew Cunanan actually had met Versace before.
Right.
And the story that we had that we talked about was how Andrew Cunanan approached Versace
at a club,
pretending that they had met before in Italy, which is a lie, which is Andrew Cunanan is a pathological liar,
right.
Which you could tell that was when he was meeting him, that he didn't know him. But I was not they did not actually hang out together at the Opera House.
No.
But they made it seem that...
I thought it was confusing.
It was not... They didn't do a very good job. I feel like it seemed like that was presented as fact rather than fantasy. And maybe in later episodes, they'll show that never really happened.
I feel like the problem was when I saw the opera scene, I thought, well, was the other one also a tall tale that he was telling his friends?
Right.
Like, do you know what I mean?
It wasn't clear enough.
It wasn't clear what was real and what he was lying about. And I felt like one thing they could have done maybe was like show like a Rashomon, like show his version
and then show Versace's version.
What happened. Like maybe it was just like, hey, I know you. And it was like literally a 1 second interaction or nothing.
And I thought they should have done that in the first episode. Maybe they'll do that in the second episode, that it never happened. Maybe it will be more effective. I don't know if they do.
It was confusing though. I agree. Like I wasn't sure. I mean, I knew the opera thing just because I had researched last week and I didn't even hear that as like a fake story.
Right.
I knew it was fantasy, but it was definitely, I thought,
it was presented as reality in the show.
Right. There was no distinction. The other
thing I have to say, I'm a big Law and Order SVU fan, and so I love a true crime show. I love it. And I know Law and Order is like fiction, but they do rip from the headlines, and it is, crime. So I feel like one thing that SVU, one of the many reasons why people love it so much is because it is very gripping and tense.
Right.
And the director on that show, the directors, they know how to build tension. The writers know how to build tension and create a sense of unease and tension and horror. And I didn't get that from this episode. I didn't get any tension, even when they were chasing him. Brendan and I were talking last night about it because we both watch it together. And he said that the scene that followed after one of the police chases was him going to the magazine kiosk and buying all the papers up. But that scene should have been interspersed with them. He thought that scene should have been interspersed with them chasing, so you didn't know if they were about to catch him or not.
Right.
But that scene happened after it was all resolved that they didn't catch him. I just felt like there wasn't, I don't know. For some reason, I just didn't get any tension in the episode.
Yeah, it's hard to...
But maybe that will come. I don't want to judge the show based on the first episode. I just wasn't personally blown away by it. I think that there were elements that I really liked. Like I really thought they did a good job with costumes. I thought they did a good job with the casting. I thought Andrew Cunanan, Darren Criss played Andrew Cunanan. I thought he was great, and I loved all his like sociopathic little tics that he had.
Right. I liked, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely watching.
Yeah. What's her name?
Penelope Cruz.
Penelope Cruz. Her Donatella accent is so good. She sounds just like Donatella.
Right. I mean, this is going to sound horrible. She's so pretty, though. It's really...
She doesn't look like Donatella.
She doesn't look like
all.
her at all. And I mean, I think the thing that's great about Donatella is that she is all look. Like, she is not like the most model looking woman, but she has created this iconic look for herself,
right?
Despite not being like the most conventionally attractive person,
right?
Do you know what I mean? Like,
no,
and Penelope Cruz is like very pretty. Do you know what I mean? It's just so, it is a bit distracting because part of me is kind of like, that's not Donatella. Like,
she doesn't look like Donatella.
Everyone else is so dead on looks wise that I think it made it stand out more for me.
I agree.
Possibly.
I agree.
I mean, it's still fine. I don't really care, but I think because everyone really kind of looks like the people they're playing, especially Versace, and I think Darren Criss looks enough like Andrew.
Right.
I think he's even half Filipino as
he
well.
Is,
like, I think that's why the Donatella really stands out to me.
She does stand out like a sore thumb because it just looks like Penelope Cruz in a wig and bleached eyebrows as opposed to Donatella.
But I mean, I feel like, you know, I'm going to still watch it, like I said before. Yeah. It's hard for me to know because I know so much about the case already, and then I did all that research last week. Is it just because I know so much that it's not as compelling, like as it might be for someone who knows nothing about the case? Like,
right.
But I don't know. I feel like I've watched tons of movie on cases that I know, and I'm still like, I hope they get caught. Like,
right.
It's not like I mean, it's not like a new thing for me where I'm watching something I know a lot about. So I feel like you can build attention. I don't know. It's hard to say. We'll see what happens. I mean, there's like 9 more episodes.
I'm curious to
how are they going to drag it out?
I'm curious to where they're going to go because we already had the murder happen. The way they're telling the story is very interesting. I'm very curious to see if they're going to go back in time to his other murders. They have to go back to his other murders.
What else would the movie be about? I mean, or the series be about?
But then is Versace even going to be in the other episodes?
I don't know.
How are they? I mean,
maybe it was a mistake
stories?
Having him killed, or it should have been killed and then immediately a flashback. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have like the cold open where Versace gets killed and then we flash back immediately to 10 years ago.
That's what I thought they were going to do. And then they just kept going back to 1997.
Right. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, that's our recap.
I think we give it, what are we going to give it?
Out of 5 stars?
5 Jimmy Choo heels.
No. Gonna give it 5 Versace.
5
Versace safety pin dresses.
We only have 5 safety pins on the dress, though. We tend to not be exposing ourselves.
Okay, I give this.
I think it's a 5 for me.
Out of 5?
No, out of 10.
Oh, we're giving it out of 10.
I have no idea. I don't know how to do this. I'm not a professional reviewer.
All things considered, I'll give it a 5 as well.
It's kind of like I'm gonna watch more, but if I wasn't into the story so much, I might be like, Do you know what I mean? Like, if I wasn't into it, I would be like, whatever. If I see it again, I see it again. If I'm home, I'll watch it. But because of what we do, and I'm definitely
I want to know where they go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good. I mean, Ryan Murphy does a good job usually making a compelling narrative, even when it's kind of cheesy and extra and over the top. You're still into it.
Totally.
Like, I was into Feud, even though that was kind of cheesy too. I was drawn in.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Cool.
That's that.
So today we are doing our Patreon pick episode, our first one.
Yay.
And this is because earlier this month we reached our first financial goal of the show, which was $500 a month on Patreon. So thank you guys so much for that.
Thank you.
We're actually at about 600 now since we reached 500 since the announcement. So that's really exciting. It really does help us a lot with covering costs and stuff. So the pick was Phil Hartman.
Were you surprised? I wasn't really surprised. When I saw the choices, I kind of figured he might be the pick. Although I thought maybe Black Dahlia.
I thought Black Dahlia was going to win, honestly. And I was hesitant. I wasn't hesitant about doing Phil Hartman. I was more, I knew I was going to go through a lot of emotion when I did this because I was such a fan of Phil Hartman's, and he was such a part of my childhood growing up between The Simpsons and Saturday Night Live. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to honor his memory and do his story thoroughly and I want to do all of our episodes. Right. I want to be very thorough with all our episodes, but I was like, oh, this is like, okay, I gotta like, mentally prepare myself for this. So I did read the book this past week called You May Remember Me, the Phil Hartman story. I read that book, which is a very thorough detailing of his life and his rise to fame and of course, the crime, which we're going to talk about. So let's just get right to the beginning. Phil Hartman was born September 24th, 1948 in Brantford, Ontario, Canada, to Rupert Hartman and Doris Marguerite. He was also the fourth out of 8 siblings. So he came from a really big family.
Wow.
Phil and his family moved to the States when he was 10, and they settled in Los Angeles on the west side, where Phil went to high school and then later to Santa Monica College. But then he dropped out to go on tour to be a roadie for rock bands.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very interesting.
I had no idea.
In 1972, he went back to school at Cal State Northridge to pursue a career as a graphic designer. He found some success designing album covers for over 40 bands, actually, including the band America. And then he also did some promotional work for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I don't think Young, but he did Crosby, Stills, Nash.
I don't know why that's making me laugh.
Well, I just wanted to clarify.
Sans Young.
Look, I just wanted to clarify in case someone was like, excuse me. It was just Nash then. Young wasn't there yet.
Right.
Or he had left. I don't know the chronology of them.
Of the band?
Of that band.
Oh, no, it's hard to keep up
I know
with
Young
those.
wasn't always there.
No. And
Okay.
he left.
And he left.
There's lots of country,
Okay.
They fought and...
Maybe that'll be another episode, a
Maybe.
bonus. So by 1975, Phil had tired of his solo work as a graphic designer because he was really craving a more social atmosphere at this point. At this point, he joined the Groundlings, which he instantly fell in love with the whole improv comedy scene when he joined this theater company. And for those of you who don't know what the Groundlings is, it's a very famous theater company in Los Angeles. Their studio's on Melrose. It's been there forever. And it's sort of been the launching pad for like a ton of comedians that including Will Ferrell, Lisa Kudrow, and John Lovitz, among dozens and dozens and dozens of other comedy stars. And Phil was a natural. Like, he hit the ground running there. He was he belonged there. He absolutely belonged there. And in exchange for the $25 a month dues, Phil redesigned the Groundlings logo. So by 1979, he had 4 years of experience under his belt. And at that time, he was doing showcases at the theater for agents and casting directors. He had become the star of the theater. I mean, he was like a veteran at that point. He'd been there for 4 years. He was like the guy to see. People knew who he was. And that same year, he made his TV appearance, his first one, on a little show called The Dating Game.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I thought that was such a weird little connection that was his first appearance on TV. He was very funny during the show, during his appearance, and he ended up winning. But his date stood him up.
What?
Yeah. Like, I wonder if she regrets that now.
I hope so.
I mean, I get it. I personally wouldn't.
Well, why go on the show?
Right.
If you're not going to do the date.
That's true.
I mean, unless unless it's Rodney Alcala. That makes perfect sense. But if it's Phil Hartman. Yeah, I mean, that seems like, he
was pretty cute, too, back in the 70s.
He's not a bad-looking guy, and if he has a great personality, which he does, like...
Right.
Jesus Christ, woman. Well, what's good enough for you? You're on the dating game, clearly.
The jig is up, lady.
Jesus.
Phil appeared in a few commercials and had some small roles in television after that show. But his first real break came when his friend and Groundlings troopmate Paul Rubens asked him to develop his new character named Pee Wee Herman.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, God. I always forget he was on this show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in 1981, the Pee Wee Herman show debuted in LA, and the taping of that show aired on HBO. Phil played Captain Carl.
Yeah.
Aww.
You know what's funny? Like, I'm friends with a lot of people in Groundlings. or ex-groundlings or whatever. And one of the people I'm randomly friends with on Facebook is Miss Yvonne.
Shut up! You're friends with Miss Yvonne?
Yeah, and she's really, really, really nice and sweet. So every once in a while, she'll like comment on something I post. I rarely post there. But when I see her, I'm like, oh my God, like I still get very excited.
Dude, I would absolutely get starstruck if I ever met anyone from Pee-wee's Playhouse.
It's so exciting for me. Like,
That's amazing.
She's very sweet. Like,
so fun fact, she was also a Groundlings person.
She's a groundling too, yeah. Yep.
So in 1982, Phil married his girlfriend, Lisa Strain. Lisa was about 10 years younger than Phil, 24 when they married. And Lisa was a big supporter of his acting career, and they loved each other very much. But Lisa and Phil were pretty different. Phil was definitely a lot more buttoned up off stage and at home, and Lisa was like this hot young little firecracker. She was very energetic, very enthusiastic, very sexy, a lot more wild than him. And she also had a way higher sex drive than Phil.
I love Lisa.
Yeah, Lisa sounds like fun. She like wanted to fuck him all the time, and he just did not have that high of a libido.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And he couldn't give her what she wanted, sexually or emotionally. Speaking of emotionally, Phil was also pretty emotionally distant as well. They just weren't compatible with each other.
An emotionally distant man? Sorry.
I am shocked.
What the? Wow.
Wow. So the marriage ended less than 2 years after it started. Paul Reubens and Phil Hartman then began developing a movie together, and in 1985, the cult classic Pee-wee's Big Adventure was released.
Best movie.
So good.
God, I love that movie.
So good. In late 1984, early 1985, Phil Hartman was then introduced to Bryn Omdahl, a beautiful, tall, blonde woman who was sometimes a model. Like, that was her deal. Bryn had grown up in Minnesota, where she had done some local modeling stuff.
A lot of women are sometime model.
Look, I was a sometime model in my early 20s.
I'm a sometime model. I was. I mean, I don't know. What the hell does that even mean? People took pictures of me.
So she wanted to be an actress, and she moved out to LA.
Okay.
And that, wasn't really happening for her.
I wonder if she went to Barbizon. I never went to Barbizon.
I never did either.
I would love to go to Barbizon.
Dude, Barbizon, it was like all about Barbizon.
Doesn't that seem like someone in like Minnesota would go to Barbizon and be like,
totally.
You should move to LA?
Because Barbizon preys on impressionable,
and it's
corn-fed
probably
girls
like
in the Midwest.
very easy to be the prettiest girl in some Minnesota small town where there's like a Barbizon, like to be the standout pretty girl.
Right.
Like it's harder in LA and New York.
Obviously.
That's why we develop personality.
So Bryn also struggled with alcoholism and cocaine addiction.
Wow.
Yes.
And this is the 80s, right?
Yes, this is. This is all throughout the early 80s. She was struggling with these two addictions. But now, at the time that she had met Phil, she had around a year sober.
Okay.
And she was going to AA meetings. Her favorite AA meeting was the Rodeo meeting, which is in Beverly Hills.
Does that still exist?
Yes, it does. The Rodeo meeting, I'm not saying how I know this, but I know this. It, is like, it's a fucking everything you would think a Beverly Hills AA meeting would be. And allegedly this was Bryn's favorite meeting. She liked going to see the celebrities that would show up there.
Oh, okay.
It was like a good people watching thing. I'm not saying that she would go there to make connections, but it was sort of like the starstruck.
Like if you're going to go to a meeting, maybe go to one where there's going to be some people you can do some people watching. Like, I mean, it's kind of weird, but I kind of understand at the same time. Like whatever keeps you sober, right?
Look, being in recovery in LA is a weird thing like that. But at the end of the day, if you
shouldn't be your priority.
It shouldn't be your priority. And the fact that there are both celebrities and people pushing shopping carts who had just come off the streets in the same building should tell you everything you need to know about alcoholism. That it does not give a shit who you are or your background. You're all fucking losers. And I say this as a loser myself. As someone who is a recovered drug addict, I say
you're like the guy who like, I'm not just the president. I'm a client.
I'm a client. I'm like the Bosley.
I'm not just
hair club
calling people losers. I am also a loser.
I'm also a loser.
Thank
I
you.
get it. It's a fucking disease.
I'm a like de facto loser. Like I'm technically not a loser, but I'm very close to losers. I don't know what I'm saying. I support it.
You support it.
I'm part of the group. It's kind of like how I'm like not really Jewish, but I am Jewish.
I dubbed Desi honorary Jew.
Or same with gay, like or bisexual. Like I'm kind of gay.
I'm not even looking forward to those replies or that think piece.
Whatever. Don't at me. Okay, go on.
Okay. So Phil had a habit of falling for anyone he started dating immediately.
Really?
Phil was a love to love guy, which I thought was odd considering that
he's emotionally distant.
He was emotionally distant, but I feel like maybe that was something that would happen to him once he was in the relationship and sort of comfortable with it.
He wanted to be in love, but then once he was there, it was scary.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like that is what happens. They shut down when they realize, oh, I can get hurt now because I care. Right? Like they want it.
Or there's actual work to do in a relationship.
Right. It's not the like the honeymoon phase or whatever is over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They think, oh, that's what happened. I thought we loved each other. It's like, no, loving
it seems
each
like
other.
He's not really picking women who are right for him too, right? Like,
well, yeah, I think he just wanted to be in these like whirlwind relationships.
Right.
Probably.
So you're ignoring a lot of red flags.
Yeah. So Phil, he fell for her really quickly, despite pretty much all of his friends' hesitations.
Oh, really?
About Bryn. Yeah. They didn't think that she was right for him. His friend Ed Begley Jr. recalls an instance where Phil blew him off for lunch at his home in Ojai because Phil and Bryn had gotten into a horrible fight and they had broken up the day they were supposed to drive up there. And Ojai is like an hour and 15 minutes away north of LA. So this was like a big plan. They had to go to their friend's home.
You don't just casually drive up to Ojai. It's a plan.
They had made like a big plan to go up there to have lunch with Ed and his wife, introduce themselves as a couple, but they didn't show up. And like Ed couldn't get a hold of Phil and was like, what the fuck happened? And they just, they stood them up. So finally at around 9 p.m., Phil called Ed and was like, look, we got in a fight. That's why we didn't show up today.
So they didn't even say they weren't showing up?
No.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So Phil and Bryn were broken up when he ended up, by the time he joined the cast of SNL in 1986. This week I watched Phil's audition tape for SNL, which we'll post it. I know
Okay.
I feel like I always say I'll post things, then I never post them. So
I
just
try
like
to post
get
things
on it.
on Facebook group.
Right.
But I don't think they're usually related to something we talked about.
Yeah.
So we should be better. We're trying.
We're really trying. So Phil, his audition tape, it's spellbinding. I mean, this guy, I feel like everyone who knows the work of Phil Hartman knows that he's a genius, but he really is. Like the thing about Phil Hartman is like he commits to a character no matter what, no matter what's happening, no matter how shitty the material is that he has to work with.
Right.
He goes balls to the wall.
It is one of those things, and I feel like Will Ferrell has that too.
Yeah.
It's like it's something you realize, I think, that with comedy, acting especially, it's like all about the commitment. Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, obviously you have to be talented and good, but it's like when you see someone really commit to something stupid, it's just funny.
Oh, absolutely. It's like when there's any hesitation there with material, I think in comedy, whether it's in stand-up or in a sketch or in a movie, like commitment goes so far with it. And Phil definitely had that. So and auditioning for SNL personally seems like one of the most stressful, fucking difficult auditions of your life to ever do, because
you're just doing characters, right? Like one after the other.
It's just you alone on a stage, minimal props. I mean, you might have like one simple prop, like a different hat, or what in this case, at one point, Phil had a ray gun, but it's like there's no set changes. You're just like blank on a stage doing this in front of people who aren't laughing.
Right.
And so you can't even gauge if they're enjoying it or not. In fact, it seems like they're not enjoying it because they're not laughing.
I actually had a friend who auditioned for SNL, and he did mention that like there's no laughter.
Right.
And he said that Lauren laughed one time
Which
during
is
the
a pretty
audition.
big deal.
And someone was like, "Oh, that's a huge deal." He didn't end up getting on Saturday Night Live, but I remember he was like so happy that at least happened, that one laugh.
Right. And
it's traumatic to do comedy and not have people laugh.
Totally.
It's really hard to keep your confidence up.
Oh my God. Like, it's terrible. It's really difficult. So Phil actually did get laughs.
Oh, good.
During his audition. I mean, it was mostly quiet and mostly silence, but he did get some laughs, which is, like we just said, a big deal. So he was also close friends with John Lovitz, who had just gotten cast on the show, and John was really pushing for Phil to get on the show. So he had that edge on him as well. And he got cast, and he was, on the show for 1986. And so he moved to New York at the age of 38. Also, Phil Hartman, I feel like there's not many older people. I think Leslie Jones is probably the oldest cast member.
Right.
And
I mean, when you were talking about it, I don't think I realized how old he was when he got SNL. Because you were like, I was like, he was in the 70s. He was like, I didn't realize how old he was when he got on SNL.
He was 38 when he got cast on SNL. His big break. It's pretty... it's cool. I like it. I always am super inspired when I see people who are,
get their success at an older age,
which is deemed,
I mean, it's like if you're a man, sure. No,
right. If you're a man, sure.
That's great. But, good for you.
Good for you, Phil. But he didn't even start doing comedy until he was 27.
Right.
Which is still a big deal to me. So he was known as the glue on SNL, and he really was. He really held a lot of scenes together. He was an anchor on the show. He wasn't known for, especially in the early years, he didn't have any signature characters.
I feel like the thing I remember about him from those earlier years, he was always really good even when he wasn't the main person.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's
it was
why
very
he was
supportive. Yeah, it was this very supportive type cast member,
right,
where he would just be there and not just lazy and
but not chew the scenery.
Exactly. It's he let those people shine, but he also did a good job. It wasn't just
right. In 1987, while SNL was on a break, he returned back to LA to see Bryn, and they got back together, and then she moved in with him in New York pretty quickly after they got back together.
Okay.
Which concerned his friends. One of Phil's former Groundlings co-stars was Cassandra Peterson, who you may know as Elvira, who I will be just referring to her as Elvira in this episode. She was set to appear on the Halloween episode in 1987. She dropped by Phil's office to say hi, and Phil showed her an engagement ring that he was planning on giving to Bryn. Elvira immediately blurts out, "Oh, God, no." That's her reaction.
Everyone needs a friend like Elvira.
Oh my God. Totally. And Phil was obviously upset, and he was like, "Get out of my office."
Right.
He was really hurt by that, which is understandable. And Elvira later said, she was like, "That was so rude of me. I shouldn't have done that."
But it was a spontaneous reaction.
It was a totally visceral, spontaneous reaction. She was not on board with Bryn at all. And she was very close with Phil. She was thinking about him and his well-being, and she thought this was a bad idea. So because of this, though, they would end their friendship for a few years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I can imagine that's pretty awkward, especially when you're in it. Can you imagine you're about to propose to someone and one of your close friends is like, "Ew, gross," and you already have the ring and stuff, and I can see both sides of it.
Honestly, in my opinion, I can see it more for some person in their 20s, but someone who is almost 40, I think you should listen to your friends a bit more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you should listen to your friends, and his friends did have a bad...
If all of your friends hate someone, that's not good.
Right.
I don't think I've ever had an experience as an adult. I remember in high school or early 20s,
right,
having friends where we all hated their boyfriend or something.
And they're still with them.
Yeah, and it was like one of those things where they would break up and you'd be like, oh my God, I fucking hated him. And then they'd get back together next week and you'd be on the outs. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
you'd either be on the outs or you would just have to like support them.
Right. So I feel like it hasn't really happened to me as an adult where I've had a friend who I hated their serious boyfriend. Like, obviously I've hated people they dated or something, but I don't bother getting into it at that point.
Right.
So it is kind of weird to me that he would propose to someone that all of his friends did not like.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how explicit they were. I guess maybe more in the beginning.
But you can tell when people don't want to hang out with you as much.
Yeah.
Because people should be joyful in that situation. Like,
right.
You know, like, I don't know. But anyways.
Right. No, I agree.
Obviously, we have hindsight, too, because they were all right.
Oh, totally. And in June of 1988, Phil and Bryn... excuse me, I skipped ahead. Phil Hartman and Bryn, they got married November 25th, 1987. Which I thought was shocking because if this happened October 1987 that he proposed to her, that's like they got married a couple weeks later.
Right. But that makes sense because it seems like a snap decision, right? Like,
right. I mean, that's pretty fast.
It seems like they broke up, got back together, and maybe she had given him some kind of ultimatum. Like,
but Phil also was like super, he had been married 2 times before that. I think there was another wife too.
Okay.
So he was like a marriage guy. Some guys are just marriage guys.
No, they are. They can't just have a casual or a non-married. It always has to lead to marriage, which I always find odd.
Right. So in June of 1988, Phil and Bryn gave birth to their first child, a son named Sean. Now, Phil's first wife, Lisa, had maintained an amicable relationship with him after all these years, after they'd split up. They were, I mean, and that happens, and that's fine. I mean, I like, you know, there are people I've dated who've had friendships with their former significant others from years ago, and I don't have a problem with it. Oh. I think as long as no one's crossing any boundaries or lines or anything, or it's like, why are you going to your emotional support for that person? Not even beyond like the whole thing of cheating, but like
if that's the person they contact when they need someone.
Yeah, it's like, well, why am I fucking here?
Yeah.
So, but they had maintained a fine relationship. They occasionally talked. It wasn't.
So it was healthy.
It seemed healthy. Yeah, it was healthy-ish. So Lisa sends a congratulations greeting card to Bryn and Phil, which is like a good sign that it was like not intrusive of their relationship in terms of like at least she's acknowledging that they're together, sort of, and like not resentful of the relationship. Yeah. So they get this card in the mail from Lisa, and Bryn was not happy.
She's like, that was the sarcastic congratulations.
She was fucking pissed.
Okay.
This is a quote from Lisa.
Oh.
I got back 4 pages of the most vitriolic, verptitution threatening of my life.
Did she get her thesaurus?
I don't know. Threatening my life, telling me if I ever came near her child, she'd kill me.
Okay.
Calling me every name in the book, telling me I'd better keep my hands off her husband or she'd come rip my eyes out.
Wow.
Just insane. She never knew me. She never met me. She didn't know anything about me.
I really would love to read the 4 pages.
I want to know what's in that letter.
Me too. Like, that sounds amazing.
Oh my God. And like, I
mean, that's something I would keep forever and do dramatic readings at every party.
4 pages.
4 pages of that kind of stuff. And I have seen some insane stuff from women, like texts my friend have gotten or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And we just laugh so hard that in my mind, I was like, I will never do that.
Have you? Okay.
I'm not that crazy, but part of me is like, well, the last thing I need is someone mocking my insanity, which I would do to me too. Like,
right.
I mean, that is just, what in the hell? Like,
have you ever done, like when you were younger, I don't expect you would have done it recently, but like when you were younger, have you ever done anything that was crazy or snapped on a guy that you were with or stay away from my man or like?
No, I never did anything like that. I did do like some, I guess what you would consider like emotionally manipulative.
Right. Like passive aggressive.
Yeah, I would do something like, if I didn't want them to leave, act like, oh, I got injured. Like, but I mean, this is like literally when I was a teenager, like my first boyfriend.
Right.
Like I would guilt him probably, but I never went off on another woman. That's something I never did. I mean, I have privately to my friends.
Totally.
Gone off on other women, but I have never confronted a woman like that. Like, in general, it's not my nature. And I do have some women right now who would love to go Florida on. But it's something I kind of fantasize about doing sometimes, but ultimately it's just not my style.
Here's the reality.
I'm like a cold revenge. Like, I'm a long-term
long con.
I don't ever want to be looking like I'm an insane person. I prefer to do it subtly. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I get my irrational anger out in a healthy way in terms of venting about it to you or venting about it to a friend. I
can't confront someone. If they came to me, then I would literally destroy them with my words. Like, I know I could, but I will never go after someone.
No.
If they come to me, then I have no choice but to fucking,
defend yourself.
Right. And then I'll go off on them and all the hurtful things that will literally ruin the rest of their life. Because I don't hold back and I know exactly where to go. Which could be why I stop myself. Because it's like, Desi, come on. Don't destroy people. It's so easy for you to do. So maybe that's why I stop myself. Because it's like, it's not worth it. Like, but yeah, if they came after me. But no one comes after me because they know. I have never done that. Have you done that? Like, to another woman?
No, never. I've never done that. I have vented to my friends about.
Oh God. And I've said insane things to you, I'm sure. Like in the heat of the moment. I mean, ultimately I have like a policy that no one is really worth my effort. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't.
And here's the thing. If your significant other, they're with you. They're not with that person.
Most of the time I think to myself also, like, I'm never going to look like the insane bitch. Like, even if something is driving me up the fucking wall, I'm going to be like, that's okay, baby. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm never going to put in writing, especially me acting insane. There's just no way I would ever do that. Like, I don't get women who send things like that. Like,
I've never sent a letter like that before to anyone.
Hell no. Why would you give someone evidence of your insanity?
Never done it. Honestly, not that I'm like this fucking spiritual gangster, but the only letters I've ever sent to people were like amends letters because I should have sent them to people.
Right.
But like, I've never sent like,
listen, bitch,
you stay away from my man. Like,
I've never loved a man enough to humiliate myself in that way. I mean, that's not a real love. I think that's part of it. Like,
right.
If I felt like someone was doing something behind my back, I wouldn't go after the woman. I would destroy the man in person. I wouldn't write a fucking letter. Like, come on. I'm not leaving a text or a message or a letter. No
it is
way.
A little extreme.
How do you write a letter, first of all?
Well, this was like the 90s or the 80s.
But to write a 4-page letter and keep your rage up for 4 pages seems literally psychotic. Like, come on.
Well, not to be an armchair psychologist here, but it appears that Brain had stopped going to her AA meetings. Right. So she was a dry drunk, which is more dangerous than a wet drunk.
Right.
Like,
okay.
Like I'm saying.
Because you have like a lot of tension.
Alcohol's the medicine.
Right.
That's just a symptom of the problem. The real problem is
you're not dealing with something.
You're not dealing with your craziness.
Right. Okay.
So she clearly was not focusing on recovery. No one who's like serious about recovery is writing a 4-page fuck you bitch letter.
Right. Well, that's like part of the program, right? Not to
harm to people.
Or to make amends to
make
people,
amends
not
to
start
people.
New things.
Right, exactly.
She was not amending. She was starting new things.
I'm saying she needed a spiritual solution, and that was not it.
No.
Okay.
No. Okay.
So Lisa confronted Phil about the letter.
Oh, good.
She was like, what the fuck is this? And Phil actually said, I knew that she wrote the letter, and you should have seen what she wanted to say. That wasn't even as bad as like her first draft.
So is he bragging that he calmed her down?
Yes.
Okay. That's such a guy move.
That is such a guy move. Like, I'm the hero in this, right?
She was initially going to say she was going to stab you in the pussy. I got her to just say she's going to rip your eyeballs out. Like, I calmed her down. Like,
right.
What the hell?
So Lisa was pissed. She was like, wait, you knew about this letter and you let her send it?
Right.
So that was the end of their friendship.
Yeah.
And, this is really crazy. Lisa also learned at some point during this that Phil had told Bryn at one point that she was not, in fact, his soulmate, but that Lisa was.
What?
Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Lisa said.
Ugh. Can you even imagine arguing about soulmate? I'm sorry.
That could be a whole other show. So, in 1990, Phil made his debut on The Simpsons as shitty lawyer Lionel Hutz, which is one of the greatest characters of all time. I fucking love Lionel Hutz. I use his gifs whenever applicable.
Right. It's a good gif.
He's like one of my favorite Simpsons characters ever. So the other Simpsons character that Phil played that he was famous for was Troy McClure, which is where the "You May Remember Me" from.
Right.
That's where that comes from, which is the title of the book that I read this week. And he made that debut in 1991. In February of 1992, Phil and Bryn's second child was born, a daughter named Bergen. While Phil's children brought him immeasurable joy, his marriage continued to be contentious. His castmate, Chris Rock, once noted that they were always fighting. Like, he always had known them as a couple that was just a fighting, arguing, not happy couple. And he didn't want to be around them when they were together. Like, he liked Phil.
It was uncomfortable.
But it was uncomfortable.
Right.
And I think a lot of people felt that way too. And it should be noted that Phil, which I wasn't surprised to learn this, that he was just beloved by everybody on set.
Yeah.
He was really easy to get along with. He was a really hard worker. He was a paternal figure to a lot of people, especially the younger castmates on the show. Like by the early 90s when Chris Rock and David Spade and Adam Sandler and Chris Farley came on, they're all in their early 20s when they debuted on the show. And he was very much a mentor.
I bet you this is also, I mean, it's his personality clearly, but I think having success later in life like that, he had lived and he knew how grateful he should be to have that. You know what I mean? And I feel like that does change your perspective. Whereas you become famous in your 20s, you're like entitled sometimes and feel like you deserve everything. So I think he did have this maturity that maybe a lot of comics.
He did.
Yeah.
And he was a very hard worker and he loved his job. Like he wasn't looking at the clock when he was on set. Like he loved the process. He loved being there. So I was surprised to learn that it seemed like he was the closest in terms of in the 90s SNL cast to Chris Farley.
Okay.
They were really close and he really took Farley under his wing. I thought that was very sweet. I'm a huge Chris Farley fan, obviously, as well. Bryn was unhappy, though, with how much time Phil spent working, and she wanted more time with him. And I think, it was interesting reading her perspective on things in this book because I didn't know a lot about how their relationship was. All you really ever heard was that she was crazy and that she was a drug addict. And Phil wasn't a mean husband or abusive in any way, but he was definitely very cagey emotionally. And
worked a lot.
And he worked a lot. And the thing that drove Bryn nuts is that they would get into these fights and Phil would just shut down. He wouldn't even fight back with her. And she wanted him to like hash it out, whatever they were arguing about. And he would just go away or lock himself in his room. Like he was
That is irritating.
Yeah. And that irritated her to no end. And Julia Sweeney talked about it. Julia Sweeney played Pat on SNL, was famous for that.
Very problematic.
Very, well, Pat's the famous androgynous character from the early 90s on SNL. And she's
also an ex-groundling.
Right. And she had developed a friendship with Bryn. So Julia got a lot more of Bryn's side of the story and their relationship. So Julia had said that, she had a lot of empathy for what Bryn went through in this relationship.
Right.
And didn't excuse her bad behavior, but could see
what was causing
that she was
ramping it up.
She was up, Phil would drive Bryn up the wall sometimes with just like, why are you so shut off? Like, talk to me. I'm your wife. Let's work this out. And he would just shut down. In 1993, Phil was filming the movie Greedy with his old friend, Ed Begley Jr. The friends had plans to have dinner with Bryn again, but Phil had to cancel again. He phoned up Ed and said that he needed a place to crash because he had gotten into a bad fight with Bryn and that they were breaking up. Phil was like, yeah, we're done. Let me stay at your place. But Phil ended up not staying over at Ed's place that night and didn't even call Ed again. And Ed just assumed that Phil and Bryn had made up.
Right.
As tensions between Phil and his wife Bryn continued, he confided again in his ex-wife Lisa. He would call her to vent about Bryn's tantrums in which she would throw things. He vented to her about her constant need for validation and her plastic surgery that she was getting. Bryn was pretty insecure, and she had a lot of insecurity, especially around Phil's fame and the fact that she had never been able to make it in the industry as an actress. And she felt like her only role in life was like, I'm the wife of a celebrity.
So I have to look good.
Right. And my husband, he's like beloved for all these things, and I'm just his wife, you know? She did have a lot of career aspirations, and for whatever reason, she wasn't able to make it. Some close to the couple speculated that this was where a lot of her anger originally stemmed from with him, just like this resentment. Yeah, this resentment of like his career and her lack of a career really is what sparked a lot of stuff and just drove her.
It clearly seemed like both of them have issues that they're not dealing with and taking it out in the wrong ways and on each other.
Absolutely.
Like both of them seem honestly very emotionally immature.
Yeah.
In different ways.
In different
ways. And
ways.
It's just like a perfect storm of a bad combination.
Absolutely.
Right?
So even though the marriage was a mess, it should be noted that Bryn was a very devoted mom to their kids, and Phil was a good father as well, even though he worked a lot, but they loved their kids.
Right.
And they really did do a pretty good job as parents in that respect. Bryn was super involved in their lives. So Phil left SNL in 1994, and in 1995, the sitcom News Radio premiered with Phil starring alongside Andy Dick. By 1996, Phil was doing news radio, and his marriage was deteriorating. Even though the public seemed to think that everything was fine. Like, it wasn't a news tabloid story that they were upset with each other or that they had problems. Like, they did a good job of covering it up on the outside. I mean, at least in the outer circle. The inner circle obviously knew that they had problems. So, they also weren't having sex. And Phil had a low libido, and Bryn wanted to have sex, and it just wasn't happening. Phil's friend Steve Small recalled a story that Phil told him once, that Phil and Bryn had a female neighbor of theirs come over one day, and Phil turned to Bryn and said, "She has great tits." Which I feel like is like, again, that's like such a crazy tone-deaf thing to say.
That is an insane thing to say.
Can you imagine? Like,
especially knowing your wife, is that insane?
Oh my God. Like, well,
and insecure?
Which is like the same insane thing that he said to Lisa, like when he said, well, you should have seen what she wanted to write.
Right.
Or saying the thing about soulmates, if that's true.
Yes. I mean, who knows?
But
I mean, maybe he is just that clueless about not saying certain things.
I think he was just clueless about it. And like, if I had like serious speculations, even if it was unfounded, but if in my mind I had convinced myself that my boyfriend was cheating on me and he turned to someone that we knew that lived next door to us and was like, "She has great tits," I'd be like, now, you know, what the fuck?
Right.
I'd be
it
like,
would spark you would be like, okay, something's going on.
I'd be extra paranoid, and it'd be just hurtful.
It's not a nice thing to say.
It's not, I mean, it's like different.
It's not like she was like, "Wow, I wish I had those tits." And he's like, "Yeah." I don't even know if that's good, but like, yeah.
Like, whatever. Like, I'll check out girls with my boyfriend because I like women too, but it's there's like a time and a fucking place.
Right.
There's a time and a place.
You know when it's not good.
That would not be appropriate to me, especially if I was like worried that he was cheating on me.
It's also something a little bit more inappropriate, I think, when it's your neighbor.
Yeah, because then you see them all the time, and it's like they're in
weirdness.
They're in way too close.
It's also
proximity.
a little disrespectful, I think, when you know them. I don't know, like it's just not cool.
Yeah, not down with that. But Phil didn't get it, why she was upset.
Right.
He didn't
The
get
problem
it.
I think with Bryn also is if she's constantly upset about everything, do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it might be hard for him to gauge when she's being out of control and when it's reasonable.
Right. So at one point, Bryn even suspected that Phil and Steve had a sexual relationship with each other, which wasn't true. But Phil's effeminate characters that he was known to play and also this interview with LA Magazine sort of fueled that
Suspicion.
speculation. And this was an excerpt from the LA Magazine story published in May of 1996. This is Phil. He says, "The gay community has always had a delightful sense of sarcasm about sexual mores. Unfortunately, to a large segment of our society, gay people are viewed as sexual outlaws. God forbid a straight person should acknowledge that there are pleasures associated with their anus."
Sorry.
That's better. That's a big, big door that people don't want to open. I thought you'd like that part.
Yeah, thank you. It's like a particular interest of mine.
But like, I mean, yeah, obviously in the 90s there was a lot more stigma and even more ignorance than there is today.
Right. And believe it or not.
Believe it or not. So like, I'm like, obviously I read this and I'm like, oh, he's not a homophobe. He's like a nice guy.
Right.
He recognizes that people are into different things.
And you,
sexually.
Just because a guy likes ass play doesn't mean he's gay. I mean,
Well,
that's
yeah.
also very
that's like a very dated,
simple-minded and dated.
Totally.
Trust me.
Desi knows. But Phil never cheated on Bryn.
Okay.
And
well, he had a low sex drive.
Yeah.
I mean, was she suspicious that the low sex drive was because he was getting it elsewhere?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was all tied to her insecurity,
Yeah.
and she was very insecure.
Right.
In 1987, Bryn lost her sobriety. She relapsed on cocaine, and shortly after, she began drinking again. On Mother's Day that year, Bryn went out to a party and came home really early the next morning, totally fucked up, and got into an argument with Phil. He told her that she needed to go back to rehab, and so she checked into Sierra Tucson in Arizona, which is a rehab. But her stay at the treatment facility was short-lived. She was there for like 4 or 5 days, and she's like, "I'm better," and she bounced. But obviously, she continued to spiral out of control with her drug and alcohol use when she returned home. Phil once again confided in Lisa. Lisa said that she was concerned about the fact that Bryn owned a gun, but Phil was certain that it was nothing to worry about. Phil couldn't understand what Bryn was going through with her addiction and blindly thought that she would just be able to pull it together. Like,
right.
You know, he innocently thought, you know, she can do it, she can figure it out, and he didn't understand what he was up against, which is drug and alcohol addiction, which is like, yeah. It's like...
It's intense.
It's intense. So on the set of News Radio, he confided in 2 of his co-stars, one of whom was living with her boyfriend, Nick Nolte, who had his own drug problems. You may remember his very famous mugshot with the Hawaiian shirt and the windblown hair.
Wait, who was dating him? Who was this?
I don't remember.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
write her name down. Phil came to set one day with scratches on his face from Bryn. And another day he arrived to set looking particularly disheveled due to the fact that he had spent the night on one of his boats sleeping. Ugh. Like he couldn't even be in the house. Only his 2 co-stars that he had told about Bryn knew the reason why.
Okay.
On December 31st, 1997, Phil and Bryn hosted a New Year's Eve party at their house. Andy Dick was in attendance. At one point during the evening, Andy and Bryn locked themselves in the master bedroom and did a bunch of blow.
Jesus.
Yeah. Phil was obviously hurt and very upset. Like, how dare you do cocaine with my wife? She's a drug addict.
It's
like,
hard to believe there was a time where people trusted Andy Dick.
I was
Do you know
just
what
going to
I mean?
say, it's like, why'd you invite Andy Dick to your party?
But there was a time where no one knew. Like,
look, everyone who lives in LA has an Andy Dick story.
Right. We have to do an Andy Dick episode.
We do. I have an Andy Dick story. Phil was hurt, and in an effort to placate Bryn at one point to try and make her happy, like this will make her happy, and like maybe she'll like settle down and knock it off and have some self-confidence, he offered to pass around a screenplay that she had written. Ugh. he reluctantly did this. He did not want to do it because he didn't think it was very good.
That's so humiliating.
Yeah, and he was passing it around to his colleagues and to his agents, sort of like, can you just say you read this? And he really just wanted for her to be okay and for their marriage to work.
Right.
So he was
doing what he could.
He was doing what he could. He was doing this because he loved her. But Bryn's mental health was on the decline, and she continued abusing drugs and alcohol, even while on psych meds. Elvira remembers a phone call that she had with Phil not long after both of their fathers had died. It was a heavy conversation about life and death. She remembers Phil saying this: "If I die tomorrow, I would know that I have had a better life than anyone could have ever dreamed of having. It has so far outweighed my expectations. I've got a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful children. I am the luckiest man alive." Aww. Yeah, I thought that was sweet. On May 27th, 1998, Phil spent the afternoon in Newport Beach with his friend Britt, hanging out on the docks and looking at boats, and later the two had lunch. He returned home at 6 p.m., where Bryn was with the nanny. Phil told Bryn that he was going to go to the Van Nuys airport where he kept his plane and that he wouldn't be gone long. After Phil left Bryn told the nanny that she was going out for drinks with a friend at Buca de Beppo, which was nearby their home in Encino. Desi's laughing at Buca de Beppo.
I am.
Because it's so dated.
Yeah, there's just something. I don't know. Also, that she would go to Buca de Beppo.
It's not very good.
No, it's just like a weird. It's like it's like someone saying they went to, like, I don't know, Bennigan's
or the Olive Garden.
Yeah. Okay.
So she went to Buca de Beppo, but they lived in Encino. That was what's nearby.
Maybe.
Look, I'm not judging.
I'm not judging
Beppo. Or
it's just
Encino.
making me laugh. Like, I don't know. It's a funny name.
Okay.
Just to get drinks at Buca de Beppo seems funny to me. It's like, what are you getting? Like grasshoppers and mudslides? Like,
she got Cosmopolitans.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's of the time.
Phil returned to their home in Encino shortly after Bryn departed for dinner, and the nanny was sent home. After dinner, or at dinner, I should say, which was really drinks. They just went to this restaurant to have drinks. She met up with her friend Christine Zander, and the two were drinking at the bar. Bryn had 2 Cosmos and half of a beer. Christine was ready to call it a night sometime after 9 p.m. Before they paid the bill, Bryn went to use the phone at the restaurant. Remember, this is the 90s.
Right.
She had to go use the phone, so she had to use the actual
payphone.
Yeah, at the restaurant, where she called her old friend Ron Douglas. Ron and Bryn had dated 15 years ago, and the two had remained friends.
Oh, it's fine for her.
So Phil knew about him, and he was okay with their friendship, just so long as that she didn't stay out extra late with him, because both of them used to do a lot of cocaine together back in the day.
So this is an amazing phone call she's making.
This is an important phone call. So at 10:15 p.m., Bryn arrived to Ron's home in Studio City. The two friends drank beer and talked about Bryn's script. She
I don't know why her script makes me so sad.
It makes me sad too. She complained about Phil a little bit and about his friend Britt, whom he had spent the afternoon with in Newport. At 12:36 a.m., Bryn used the phone to call her friend Susan, someone that she had used to also done coke with.
Okay.
So she's looking to score this night.
She's making a lot of bad choices.
Yeah. But Susan didn't pick up. Bryn finally left Ron's house at around 12:45 a.m. Ron asked Bryn to call when she got home to make sure that she got home safely, but she never did. At some point a few hours later, Bryn crept into the master bedroom where Phil was asleep. She retrieved his gun from the lockbox in a closet. She stood over Phil as he lay in their bed asleep, and she shot him into the right side of his neck. Bryn fired the second shot into his arm, and the third shot was fired in the middle of his face and into his brain.
Jesus.
Bryn then called Ron at around 3:25 a.m. She told Ron that Phil wasn't home, but that he had left a note saying that he was going to be home later that night. Bryn asked if she could come over, but Ron told her to just try and get to sleep. 20 minutes later, Bryn was banging on Ron's door. Ron answered the door, and Bryn was standing there in her pajamas and socks, but no shoes. He could tell that she was pretty fucked up. Ron was upset, but he let her inside. Once inside, Bryn started crying and saying that she killed Phil. And Ron was like, no. Like, he couldn't believe that. I mean, he's like, this is a woman who is just really drunk and upset about something. And okay, we're going to try and sober her up right now. So Bryn keeps passing out at Ron's house. She keeps passing out, waking up, crying. I mean, like, she's really gone.
Right.
And he's concerned. He wants to keep her awake so that, you know, nothing bad happens. And finally, at around 6 a.m., Ron was convinced that she was sober enough to drive home, which I don't think seems like a long enough time, personally. If she was, like, passing out just 2 hours prior.
That
it's
you
like,
would let someone drive home in that state.
Right. But he also just wanted to get her the fuck out of his house, too.
That I understand.
Right. He's like, just fucking leave. Okay, you're sober enough. Like, he made her some coffee.
Right.
He's like, go. But Bryn insisted that Ron follow her back to their house in Encino to make sure she got back okay. So she told him, take the gun. He does. He took the gun. And on their way out, he looks in the chamber and he notices that there's only 3 bullets in the chamber. And he got scared. On the way home, Bryn was driving like a total maniac. She's speeding and she's blowing every single stoplight like she's out of control driving. And while she was driving, she picked up the car phone and she called her friend Judy. She starts sobbing into the phone and screaming, I think I killed Phil. And Judy's like, wait, what? Where are you? Where are you?
Right.
Oh my God, what's happening? And she hangs up and she pulls into her home in Encino and Ron pulls up behind her. The two ran into the house and into the master bedroom where Ron saw Phil's lifeless body. Oof. And that's when it hit him, like a ton of bricks. Next, Bryn called her friend Steve and Marcy on the phone and she told them that she killed Phil. So Bryn has been just calling everybody at this point. I killed him. I killed him. Ron's freaking out. He doesn't know what to do. He does manage to call the police. And while he's still in the house, he makes this phone call to the police and he informs them, like, look, there's been a shooting. I'm at the house right now. I saw the body where it happened. I'm here with the person who said she killed her husband. So next, Bryn goes back into the master bedroom and she locked the door and Ron tries to break in.
So he didn't keep the gun.
He did keep the gun.
Okay.
Bryn has a gun of her own.
Oh, that was Phil's gun.
That was Phil's gun that she took. And so Ron is still in possession of this gun that's in a plastic bag at this point he had put in. And he's holding it and he has just gotten off the phone with the police, but Bryn's locked herself in the master bedroom where Phil's body is. And she's screaming and wailing.
The kids are not waking up?
They're not at this point. So Ron is trying to break in. And at this point, Bryn called her sister Kathy, and Kathy's at work. And she tells her that she killed Phil. Phil's dead. And then she says to Kathy, tell the children I love him. So her sister's rightfully, like, really concerned and freaking out. Then she hangs up on Kathy before she can explain. And the phone rings, and it's the police calling. Bryn picks it up, and she tells the police that she's there and that Ron is also in the house. And before Bryn hangs up the phone, she says, help me. Steve and Marcy, who was the couple that she called before, they arrive at the house, but they can't get into the house. And they're at the gate, like, but trying to buzz, like, let us in, let us in. They're calling Bryn on her cell phone. And she's like she's a mess. She can't even speak coherently at this point. They finally figure out how to get in. And they head over to the house, but police arrive shortly after. And Sean, their 9-year-old son, had woken up at this point.
Okay.
So Sean is safely escorted out of the house by Ron and the police. He's taken into police custody at that point. Ron also gives police the gun that was used to murder Phil's gun. And their daughter Bergen was still asleep at this point, which is so crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much noise happening. The police make their way inside and can hear Bryn screaming. She's on the phone with her sister Kathy again. Like she'd called her back. When at this point, Bryn heard an officer call her name and she hung up on Kathy. She said, "Gotta go." Bryn then got into bed with Phil, took her own .38 caliber pistol, put it in her mouth, and fired a shot. She was killed instantly.
Oof.
Before she was still alive when the police were there,
right.
Which is so chilling to me. I didn't know that detail.
I did know that. I remember that because I remember there was like this period where you kind of feel like
she could have survived or
right, which I don't
saved.
know, like what that would have made better, but
I thought about that too. I was like, damn, like I mean, this is such a tragic situation all around. Like,
right,
what would have been. Which is worse for the children, that their mom isn't alive or that she's in prison for the rest of
I don't know,
and they have this relationship with her. I don't know, like it's just horrible. It's awful. So the police entered the master bedroom to find the grisly scene, both Phil and Bryn in bed together, dead. On June 4th, 1998, a ceremony was held for both Phil and Bryn at Forest Lawn Memorial in Los Angeles. And Forest Lawn is a very famous cemetery in LA. Michael Jackson's buried there.
Right.
A lot of celebrities are buried there. So they had their funeral, like a joint funeral, the two of them together. Both Bryn's parents and Phil's mom spoke at the funeral. In his will, Phil had requested that his ashes be scattered over Emerald Bay off the coast of Catalina Island. And his children were also given everything in the will. So that's the story, but I'm going to leave with this quote by a friend of ours, actually, that I found in People magazine from the article that came out in 98 after this happened. And this is a quote from one of Phil's former Groundlings cast members, which is Patrick Bristow.
Oh, yeah.
Which is our dear friend Andy's husband.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick said in this interview, "He was always gentlemanly and kind, which is rare in comedy. Phil was everybody's big brother."
Aww.
Yeah. So, yeah, there was actually one, I forgot about this tidbit. There was a little thing I read that allegedly John Lovitz, who was one of Phil's best friends, he ran into Andy Dick at the Comedy Store in like 2006 or something like that. And he confronted Andy and was like, "God, like, fuck you forever. Like, you gave Bryn coke. You got her back addicted to cocaine.
Right.
And she killed Phil.
A lot of people blame Andy Dick for things.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
we have to do an Andy Dick episode.
We will.
Because it will be insane.
Andy Dick's top 10 greatest hits of fuckery.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. That's very sad.
It's really sad.
It is a crazy story. Like, of all, I just remember when that happened, thinking like that is like the last person I would think
It was so shocking.
that would go this way. I mean, it's a shocking story no matter who, but it's not like someone who had, like you said, a big tabloid love life that was constantly like
Right.
Madonna and Sean Penn or something. Do you know
Where
what I mean?
there's
Like there's a lot of
clashes.
clashes and rumors of violence and da-da-da-da. And even though that was happening, they were having these fights. It wasn't like you said, like a tabloid story.
It was shocking
So
to
it
the
was
public.
shocking out of nowhere. I had never even heard of his wife. Like,
No, I didn't know about his wife either. I mean, maybe I knew he was married, but I didn't think about. She wasn't.
it wasn't
in
a
the news.
relationship that was in the tabloids.
No.
I mean, so yeah, it was completely shocking.
And he didn't have drug problems or wasn't.
I mean,
wild.
murder-suicide is crazy.
Right.
Just non-celebrity. It's always a
Right.
shocking story. So yeah, it was, and of all people, him, who seemed like a genuinely good guy.
He was a good
Yeah.
guy. He was. I was happy to learn that he was a good guy. He had his own faults and flaws,
Right.
like everybody.
Of course.
But he was a nice person, and he tried to make the world. He wanted to make the world a better place.
Right. Like I said before, though, I feel like this was just a perfect storm of two
Oh,
people who should never have been
They
together.
should not have been together. They shouldn't have gotten married. And Bryn,
I think like they brought out the worst in each other.
right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and everyone has that side. I've been in relationships where we're both fine separately, but together we brought out like the worst
Right.
qualities.
And
do you know what I mean? Like,
right. And obviously Bryn had her own issues no matter who she would have been with.
right.
Because she was a drug addict and an alcoholic who wasn't treating her addiction.
And I feel like that's probably, someone who is dealing with that kind of stuff doesn't really mature emotionally
No,
until they
you
deal
don't.
with it.
You
so
don't.
she's like at this level
Right.
of I mean, when I'm hearing this stuff, I don't know how old she was. I know she was younger than Phil, but we're talking about a woman in her late 30s when she died, right? Like
40. She had
40,
just turned
yeah.
40.
I mean, this is someone who should have not been acting like an 18-year-old with her first boyfriend.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
she was emotionally stunted.
Yeah, she was
from
emotionally stunted
years
from years
and
of
years
abuse.
right.
So, yeah, it's just this worst combination,
Right.
I think.
Right.
And then obviously, this is like they both had guns. Like,
right. Well, Ed Begley Jr. actually said that after this incident happened, that he turned his gun in to the police. He said, I don't even want anything to do with this. I don't want it in my house. I had this for protection, but I don't feel safe with it anymore in the house. Like, I don't trust it. And whatever you feel about gun control or guns or whatever, it's like, that's fine.
Look,
like, I have
guns just make it much easier to kill somebody.
This is
Do you know
true.
what I mean? Like, I think we can all agree. Like, I could shoot someone before I could stab them or strangle them.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something unreal about it, I think. Like,
yeah.
So I can see why it's more, that's just my opinion.
Right. I don't think a person like,
I don't think Bryn would have done anything other than shoot him. Do you know what I mean?
I also, well, yeah. And she was drunk and it was so spontaneous and sort of, she just, it's
you can't,
really,
there's no going back.
Yeah.
Once you shoot someone when you're drunk. Whereas if she started attacking him physically,
maybe
he would have woken up and pinned her. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't know.
It's just, it's
sad.
Like, it's such a tragedy is what it is. It's just, the whole thing is so tragic.
And to do it with the kids in the house. I mean, it's just, what a horrible.
And I was thinking about, I started crying when I was at the end of this book. Just,
are the kids okay? Did you see
yes,
anything about
the
them?
kids are
So
okay. They're
normal.
okay. I stumbled across the daughter's Instagram page because I looked her up to see if she was okay, what she was up to, and she seems like she's doing really well. She's engaged and she seems happy, and she had gone to the 40th anniversary SNL. Cool. Remember they did that a few years ago? And so, like, I don't know what the son is up to, but I was thinking about the kids a lot and just how my heart really broke for them.
Right.
It really broke for them.
Well, yeah.
And having to grapple with the fact that, like, their mom did love them, but she was a very sick person.
Right.
She's a very sick person.
No, I'm sure that's a very
like how complicated that is. Yeah, like I can't even imagine. Yeah, I know this like story is really sad, but I also
and he is right though. What a great life up to that point.
Right, he had a very good life.
He did do a lot.
He made a lot of people happy.
He kind of had success late in life, and that's cool.
It is cool
because it is sort of like a inspirational. I think
it is to me.
A lot of people feel like in Hollywood, especially, they have to give up if they haven't made it by like 25. Do you know what I mean?
So absurd.
It is absurd, but I feel like it is good to see and know that people. If you if you love what you're doing, just do it.
Right. You should continue to do it. Doesn't matter how old you are.
So, but yeah, he's great, and we have his work.
And I rewatched a ton of like my old favorite sketches.
They still hold
up with him in it. Yeah, he's just so brilliant.
And the Simpsons stuff is just timeless.
Oh my God.
The characters are amazing.
It's still hilarious. So I'll, try and post some of my favorite clips this week. And you can see the stuff I was influenced by in comedy. My personal favorites.
We'll join our Facebook group.
Yes.
If you haven't already, it's really fun.
It's called Hollywood Crime Scene Friends.
So we post stuff and we have discussions, as we said before. And you can follow us on our other social accounts.
And you can post your own favorite Phil Hartman sketches.
Right. Yeah, you guys can share and post that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
More taters, Mom.